Okay. This is going to be a demonstration for outlining your aerial perspective seascape drawings with the Sharpie pens. So in your bins at your tables, I'm going to leave some Sharpie pens in your bin. So you'll have like this, fine tip Sharpie pen point that you've used before in class. So this one you're primarily going to use for like most of your drawing. And then I left you this thicker marker Sharpie at your table as well. So there's some areas you want to color in black though, because I know some people do some shading in their drawings. This is what you would use to color in those black areas. Okay, but you're going to be using both of these Sharpie pens. Let me know if your pens are worn out though. I can give you replacement pens. It's fine. Okay, but yeah, these are gonna be at your tables for you guys to work with. But pretty straightforward though. You're just gonna be just re-outlining the drawing that you've done before, and yeah, definitely will give one of the big erasers, either the white or the pink erasers in your bins, and just kind of clean it up as you work along. Okay, but it's pretty straightforward though. So, I would just take your time. Just redraw your lines again. So, hopefully you didn't draw them too dark, and if you drew them dark, it's fine. It's not a big deal. But you're just gonna use your rulers again. Okay, don't freehand it with your hands, but you're gonna draw it with the rulers, the sharpies, and it should be an easy, smooth, clean. Just outlining the drawings. So again, just take your time with the drawing. I want to say if you've gotten your whole drawing done though, this should only take you about one class period to complete this part of the assignment. Okay, but it's just really outlining your entire drawing. Okay, so I would just outline it with the Sharpie pens here. Okay, so real simple. I'm just outlining it again, and just really take your time with this. Really, just tracing over your lines. This is pretty much like draftsmanship at this point. Okay, but definitely wouldn't freehand any of the lines that you did, especially if you did like a really, really nice drawing. You don't want to mess up at this point. Okay, but just take your time though. And just draw the lines. And, shouldn't have any problems with it. So if you do mess up on it a little bit, like I messed up there, it's not a big deal. Just keep going with it. Okay, and just remember though, like any major mistakes that you make though, you can always try to like embellish those mistakes. So for example, let's just say like oops, I drew this line too far up, like right here, like oops, I drew like that line too far up over there. Okay, so don't worry if that happens. Okay, just keep going with it. I might actually make this line kind of go up over on top of it. Maybe I can add like extend that line even further on some of the lines here, just to kind of create like a little pattern going on here. So maybe every other line I can make it a little bit longer. Okay, but it's fine if you mess up though, but just kind of make it so it's like you purposely messed up on it, and it should just be fine with it. If I want to even take it like a step further, maybe I can put like an extra line up here to kind of line up with those edges there. Okay, but there's ways you can kind of just like make those mistakes as like ways to embellish the mistakes if needed. And maybe these lines here, I might actually just have it go across all the way. So originally I had it kind of going the other way, but you can always change up your drawings as you guys are drawing with the Sharpie pens. Like I feel like this is gonna be kind of like a pain to have to redraw this part again. So I might actually just have the lines kind of crisscross through. So this line here will, I'll just have crisscross to the building. Why not? See how it looks. I might actually like how that looks better. So feel free to change up your drawing if you would like to, though. Sometimes you can embellish those mistakes you make with the Sharpie pen. The only thing I'll say to be really careful about those, if you draw freehand though, then it's like you're not really trying, because again, a lot of this drawing is really using the rulers when you draw. Okay, so I ended up changing like how that whole building looks now because of that one mistake I made. So you're gonna be primarily using this to draw it, and then after you're kind of done, you can just use the eraser just to erase those lines. So I would do this at the very end, but I'm just only showing you like a small section of it. I'm not going to do my whole drawing. Okay, but it took me about like 5 minutes just to do this one building. Okay, so but you can just erase the lines that you made before. All right, and then the Sharpie marker. Okay, so this is like where you can actually actually there's a little line right here I need to finish. I'm just gonna freehand it. Yeah, this is where you can kind of color in the lines. So maybe I actually don't really like how these lines look, so maybe I can just color that line in here. Okay, I'm just taking my time. I'm not really using the ruler, I'm just using it to just color it in. Okay, now kind of keep in mind though that I did give you the thicker watercolor paper. So if you wanted to, we're gonna color this with watercolors as well. So, it doesn't have to be like all a drawing Sharpie project. But if you wanted to be mostly drawing though, that's fine. It's up to you. You can do that. So I'm just doing these lines here. Actually might continue that line up there. Just a little bit of interesting pattern going on. So this is taking a little bit of precision though, but just take your time with it. If it's a little off, it's fine. Okay, but you see get the idea though. I would just continue those lines there. If you wanted to do like maybe textures for the building, that could be really neat as well. So I saw some of you guys doing some textures already with your some of the buildings. So maybe like every other window, I might just do like some lines here like this, if I wanted to. So I'm just doing it for like every other building here, just to kind of create like a little checker pattern going on. So feel free to do this with the Sharpie if you want to add some details to some parts of the building. Be really neat. So it's really up to you how much of this you want to draw and how much of this you want to like use watercolors. And then even after you add the watercolors too, you can always draw more on top if you want to. Oops. Definitely take a look at some of those examples from before. I'm just kind of freehanding it right now, but I'll try to do a little checker pattern with this building here. Just take your time with the drawing and see what things you want to do with each of the individual buildings, because you can definitely give the buildings a lot of character, a lot of visual interests, with the drawing, depending on like what kind of lines, patterns, textures, things you draw on the building. You can make that building look really, really interesting. Okay.